So folks, today we're going to talk a little bit about the Minn Kota Ultrex. Do you really need one? What's some of the advantages? What's some of the disadvantages, if there is any, of the Minn Kota Ultrex? So, man, I got so many compliments and so many questions. You know, the the Minn Kota Ultrex is, I want to say, something that's fairly new to the industry. It's definitely not brand spanking new, but it's you know, it's only been out a couple years. I was really slow to jump on that bandwagon, and of course everybody asks, they say, well, everybody's running one on tour, like as there's some kind of prerequisite that if, since everybody else is doing it, it was for me. In my opinion, there's three things that I have no tolerance on using what I think is the best. One is going to be my big engine, two is going to be my trolling motor, and three is going to be my batteries. Those three things, in my opinion, are the most important things that you can have on a bass boat. All else is kind of just fluff, but if you don't have an engine, you don't have batteries, you don't have a trolling motor, you're going to be stuck. You can't fish. There's nothing that aggravates me more than battery, trolling motor, and big engine problems. So, with that being said, I had a system that's been working for me flawlessly for years. So I'm not just going to up and change because somebody came out with something new, or because people say, well, why didn't you, or such and such is doing it. And by the way, there's quite a few anglers still haven't switched to the Fortrex, or they're still using the Minn Kota Fortrex, which I've used for probably about 10 to 12 years. Never had a single problem. The only problems I've ever had are the issues that I broke. I never had an issue out of my Minn Kota Fortrex. So I was very slow to just jump on the Ultrex bandwagon. But I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that I like about this trolling motor, and some of the things that I'm kind of like, I kind of wish I wanted to have my Fortrex back. Right off the jump, do you have to have one? Absolutely not. You don't have to have one. It doesn't make you catch more fish. It doesn't make you more competitive. It does none of that. Maybe it makes the day a little bit easier. It's great that it holds you in place. No doubt. Those are great things. It steers a little bit easier. Great. That will not put an extra fish in your boat, I promise you. So, right off the jump, before we get to anything else, you don't have to have one. If you've got a traditional cable steer trolling motor, you're doing just fine. Don't go out and break the bank just to buy a Minn Kota Ultrex. You don't have to do that. You don't have to do that. If you want one and you think it's going to make you better, go get one. Here's the one I'm running. I'm running the Minn Kota Ultrex 112 36 volt trolling motor. Let's look at the foot pedal here. So this is kind of where everything goes down here. This is an electronic steer trolling motor. It's very easy to steer this trolling motor. At wide open throttle, I guess you would call it throttle wide open, it's just as easy to turn this trolling motor pedal as it is when you're at 20%. You see, you got a couple extra functions over here on the sides. We'll go through some of these buttons that they've got. You got a neutral button. I'm not even really sure what the neutral button's for. I'm just going to be honest with you. Have no idea what that's for. This is your continuous button. You can see his spotted bass has spit up a little thread fin shad that I did not remove. Sorry. Let that go. But this is just your, if you just want to go to a waypoint, you can punch that in. If you guys have Humminbird electronics, of course I run Lowrance, but even if you don't have Lowrance electronics, you hit this button and it just automatically just keeps the boat going like it is now. You can see we're just going at 50%, and it's just going to make me go in a straight line. Here's the button that everybody's ranting and raving over right here. This is the anchor mode button. So when you mash this button right here, it's going to automatically stop the boat. It knows exactly how much pressure, you know, how much gas to put on the trolling motor. You can see it's starting to just keep me in one place. Now, the fact that the trolling motor holds me in place is awesome, and to me that is the best attribute of this deal. So a lot of times when you're back there culling in the trolling motor, instead of getting blown off your spot and having to pull back up to it later on, this trolling motor is going to hold you in place. Or, well, you know, I guide a lot of times when I'm at home, so I can hit that waypoint button. If we're over the top of a brush pile, I can just let the client get up here on the front, and they can just doodle around. I can sit in the console and do whatever I want to do. So the things about the anchor mode are great. I love that. I love the continuous mode button, and all these buttons, all these accesses to the trolling motor are very easy to access just with your foot, with your touch of a button. You know, I like I also like the electronic steer. It's being real easy. to navigate. No matter how fast or how slow you're going, you got the same amount of pressure on your foot pedal. That's always great too. You know, another huge concern for me is I use my Lowrance electronics a lot. Fish offshore a lot, fishing 25 to 50 foot of water. And Minn Kota has over time had issues with interference with Lowrance electronics and Minn Kota trolling motors. I don't have any interference whatsoever, so when I go to apply power, there's no interference on my 2D sonar. Everything shows up nice and clear. You can see I've got it on 10% here, or number 10, or 100%. Just hit the throttle and there's no lines or anything at all. Even when I move out deep, typically your interference is worse the deeper you go, but there's no interference at all. So that's definitely a plus, having no interference, because I cannot stand trying to read my graph and you can't see what's going on because you got interference on your graph. One thing I like about a Minn Kota, when I go to crank up the power and I hit the button, it just gradually puts on the power. It doesn't put that whole 100% of the battery on at once. It just kind of gradually goes into it. That does a couple things. One thing it does is it kind of saves your bracket. You know, throwing that 112 pounds of thrust at your bracket all at once, just a touch of a button, that's definitely hard on all the bushings and everything in your trolling motor bracket. Other thing it does is it saves you from being thrown out of the boat. Minn Kota's always been really good about gradually applying the power to the trolling motor, so if I can turn that thing up to 100%, turn it left or right or whatever, and when I go to hit the gas, it's not just going to suddenly jolt and throw me out of the boat. So that's great. Let's talk about some of the things that I think are it took some getting used to. I'm not going to say this disadvantages of having a Minn Kota Ultrex, but some things that I'm having to get used to that from switching from a traditional cable steer to this trolling motor. So number one, so right off the bat, one of the things that I had to get used to is this. The noise. The noise. Trolling motor is extremely noisy, guys. There's no way of getting around it. So when I go to make quick adjustments with my foot, it's very loud. So to me, that's a concern. I fish spotted bass, we fish over brush piles, we'll fish sea baits over and over on the same places all the time. And they're very aware. I tell people all the time, I think spotted bass is the smartest of all the 3 bass species, or 5 or 6 bass species, whatever you want to call it. But the 3 that we fish the most for, largemouth, smallmouth, spotted bass, I feel like spotted bass are some of the smartest or the most aware of their surroundings. I don't like making a lot of noise. And one of the disadvantages is this trolling motor is extremely loud. When you go to move the trolling motor, when you move the foot pedal, it's going to make noise every single time you touch the pedal. With my cable steer, it's silent when I go to hit the pedal. So that's one disadvantage that I think you have using the Minn Kota Ultrex. To go along with the noise, especially if you hit the anchor mode when there's no wind, the thing really sometimes it can make a lot of noise. It'll start pushing around, doing a lot of different circles and donuts like that. You're not even moving, but it's just trying to find itself, and it makes quite a bit of noise just moving around all the time. That can be a little annoying for me. So I can imagine yourself just sitting there sight fishing. You're trying to be nice and quiet so that fish doesn't bother, is not aware of where you are, and your trolling motor is just sitting there making a bunch of noise. So that is somewhat annoying to me. You can see there's not a lick of wind blowing around me. It's dead slick calm. And it seems like the calmer the water is, the more that it wants to make more noise. You know, as far as weight goes, the trolling motor seems to weigh about the same, maybe a touch heavier than my Minn Kota Ultrex was. But overall, the weight doesn't really bother me that much at all. So the Minn Kota Ultrex, great addition to your boat, man. I really do think so. The advantages definitely outweigh the disadvantages. Really the only thing that I have for you as far as the disadvantage, I do think it's a little bit noisy. I think the trolling motor is a little bit noisy. At first, after you've used the cable steer at wide open, it can be a little tricky to actually steer the boat on it, because it's pretty jerky, it's pretty sensitive. So any little inch that you move the trolling motor, it'll just about throw you out at wide open throttle. You know, one thing I did as well on this boat is I installed a little bit larger trolling motor shaft. I went with, I think, a 52-inch trolling 52-inch trolling motor shaft this time for a couple reasons. You're fishing offshore. Being able to keep that trolling motor in the water is going to make you a lot more efficient. It's not going to be as hard on your batteries. You're going to be a lot quieter, and you're going to actually be able to move and go against the wind. And that is something I think I will always have on every boat that I own from now on, is getting a longer trolling motor shaft, because I definitely see all the advantages. You know, when I go in a little bit shallower water, I just lift it up. Hadn't had a single problem with it at all. The other reason I did is this year I ran a Mercury Verado. You can see back there on my boat. Mercury Verado is a little bit heavier than your traditional two-stroke engines, so my boat squats just a touch in the back. So just 2 or 3 inches makes a huge difference. You wouldn't think it would, but that's the difference between your prop on your trolling motor cavitating and not. And if it's cavitating, you're not moving, you're not being efficient, you're making noise, and you're just wasting trolling motor batteries. So I would highly suggest for you guys that like to fish offshore a lot, like I do here where I live, to get you a little bit longer trolling motor shaft. You'll definitely be glad you did. So you can see you can pair, there's a remote control, you see a button right there that you can use to pair your trolling motor with a little controller that you can use, and you can actually drive this trolling motor without the foot pedal. But you know, I don't really use that as a bass fisherman. It's not really applicable. But for you guys that have center console boats, saltwater boats, that's probably a great option for you guys to be able to run the trolling motor from no matter where you are in the boat. But for me, it just hasn't been applicable, and I haven't used it. One thing I do love, I like how flat and compact the foot control is. One thing about that is it makes it where it's a lot easier on your back, because you're standing level. It's not like you're sitting on top of a hill all day trying to run the trolling motor. I can stand flat-footed on top of this and have both legs at the same angle, and that's just easier on your back, easier on your core. You're just going to be able to fish a lot more comfortably throughout the day. So just to round out the conversation, is the Minn Kota Ultrex worth it? I think it is. There's no doubt. I think it's worth the money. I don't think you have to have one. I think it's a great trolling motor, especially for guys I fish with. One thing I've noticed with fishing with a lot of people that don't fish quite as often as I do, is the biggest problem they have is boat control. Boat control is a problem. This is a deal that's going to help you. It's a deal that for somebody that really doesn't know how to maneuver the boat that well, this is going to make you better. And a guy that knows how to maneuver himself around in a boat and is really keen on how to make a boat, you know, get in and out of places, it's just going to make him that much better. So all in all, I think it's definitely worth the money. It's a great addition to your boat. You don't have to have it, but I think it's going to make a good fisherman better. And for those guys that are new to the sport and new to actually handling a boat, it's going to make it a lot easier for you to get used to having to use a foot control trolling motor.